when we bind off the stitches, we have two layers, and we want to bind off the knit stitches of the front layer together with each other, and the purl stitches of the back layer with each other, and result with a bind off chain for the front layer separate from a bind off chain for the back layer. So we need to keep binding off and rearranging the knit stitch, so we have always knit stitch next to a knit stitch and purl stitch next to a purl stitch. As for colors, if you want a clean edge at the top of your work, then use one color to bind off all the knit stitches, and the second color, the other color, to bind off all the purl stitches, which will give you one chain in one color and another chain in the other color, which is a very clean edge. But when we bind off for the underarm or a place where we are going to seam later, we want to keep the bind off in pattern. So when we seam, it looks seamlessly and we don't have a straight line in one color. So let's begin the bind off stitches. The first two pairs is a little bit different than the rest. We're going to bind off, we're going to knit the first stitch with the color that is on the chart. And we're going to take the next purl stitch and place it on a marker behind the work, because we want to first bind off the first two knit stitches. So I'm holding it in the back, and now I arrive at the knit stitch of the second pair. I'm going to knit this stitch, and do the first bind off, and make sure that your stitches are not too loose, not too tight. Adjust the height of the stitches and bind off. Now we're going to take the yarns to the front, because we're going to purl the stitches, and this stitch that we took to the back is not worked yet, so we're going to place it on the left hand needle first. We're going to work to purl this stitch and then purl the next stitch, so we can bind them off. And again, adjust the size of your bind off stitches. So now the first two stitches on my right hand needle will always be worked. So I just work one stitch, bind it off, work the second stitch, bind it off. So now it's a little bit easier. First we need to take the purl stitch out of the way, because we need to come back to bind off the knit stitches. Let's take the yarns to the back, knit the next knit stitch, and bind it off. Take the yarns to the front, and the purl stitch is already worked, so we're going to place it on the right hand needle and work the next purl stitch and bind it off. And again, check the size of your stitches. After the bind off, we're going to take this stitch, the purl stitch, to the back. take the yarns to the back, knit the next knit stitch, and bind it off. Bring the yarns to the front, place the purl stitch on the right hand needle because it's already good to go. Purl the next purl stitch and bind it off. And after the bind off, we can take it to the back again to clear the way to the binding off of the knit stitches. So I'm going to knit the next stitch, bind it off, bring the yarns to the front, place the purl stitch back on the, on the right hand needle because it is good to go. Purl the next stitch, and bind it off. Let's do it one more time. Take the purl stitch, place it on the marker in the back. Make sure it's not too loose. Yarns to the back. Again, adjust the size of the stitch. Knit the next stitch, bind it off. Take the yarns to the front, place the purl stitch on the right hand needle, and purl the next stitch, and bind it off. So let's see the result. We can see that we have one chain on the front layer, and then we have one chain on the back layer, and they are separate. So we can later on sew the back layer with the back layer and the front layer with the front layer of the second piece. And this is how it should look like.